This story is not meant to be heard after midnight.
Marcus Holloway walked along the slick, rain-soaked streets of Ravenwood, the faint hum of streetlights casting long shadows that seemed to twist unnaturally. Each step echoed against the empty buildings, a lonely rhythm that amplified the tension in his chest. For years, the town had whispered about the Ravenwood murders, a string of gruesome killings that had left families shattered and the police baffled. And now, Marcus was once again drawn to the heart of the terror, to the site of the latest death. The victim lay sprawled on the floor of an abandoned warehouse, their eyes wide in silent horror. Symbols etched into the walls with a precision that was almost ritualistic glimmered faintly under his flashlight. Marcus felt a chill that crawled up his spine, a sensation beyond fear. It was as if the darkness itself had weighed, pressing down on his shoulders, making each breath shallow. He knelt beside the body, studying the intricate markings. Some matched symbols he had seen in case files from years ago, yet others were new, strange, cryptic patterns that hinted at something beyond human understanding. Then he noticed a faint shimmer above the victim, like heat rising from a fire, yet cold to the touch. A whisper, almost imperceptible, brushed his ear. Return, witness. Marcus's instincts screamed at him to leave, but his mind refused. The killer, or whatever presence haunted Ravenwood, was toying with him. Every movement, every choice he made seemed preordained, choreographed to lure him deeper into the horror. He scanned the room, noticing a cracked mirror in the corner. For a brief instant, the reflection that stared back was not his own, but that of a tall, shadowed figure, grinning with a malevolence that froze his blood. Marcus stumbled back, heart hammering. This was not a simple murderer. This was a force that transcended human morality, patient, calculating, and aware. The whispering grew louder, twisting into fragments he could almost comprehend. Shadows danced along the walls, as if alive, bending to some invisible rhythm. He realized that the killer's signature was more than a pattern. It was a ritual, a message, a warning. Marcus shivered, understanding that he had become part of a game that had no rules, no mercy, and no escape. Marcus moved cautiously through the derelict warehouse, the stale air thick with the metallic scent of blood and decay. Each step crunched against broken glass, echoing ominously. He approached a corner where the floorboards were stained dark, remnants of a previous victim. A faint glow emanated from an old, dust-covered ledger, its pages yellowed and brittle. The handwriting was jagged and frantic, detailing dates, names, and cryptic messages that seemed to map a timeline of horror. His pulse quickened as he realized some of the entries coincided with the murders he had investigated years ago. Others hinted at future crimes yet to unfold. The writing seemed almost alive, quivering on the page, as if acknowledging his presence. Outside the warehouse, The wind howled through broken windows, carrying whispers that blended with his own rapid heartbeat. Marcus's hand trembled as he traced one of the entries. The shadows remember. They return. The words pierced his mind with uncanny precision. Every instinct screamed danger. The air seemed to thicken, constricting around him like a vice. He spun around and noticed shadows clustering unnaturally, forming shapes that resembled human figures but moved independently, defying physics. A photograph lay nearby, half buried under debris. A family once whole, now frozen in terror. Marcus felt a shiver of recognition. One face, a young boy, seemed impossibly familiar. His stomach churned. Had he overlooked this connection all these years? Then, a faint tapping, rhythmic and deliberate, echoed from the darkness. It was a sound that shouldn't exist in an empty warehouse, yet it was unmistakably deliberate, guiding him further inward. He advanced cautiously, each breath visible in the chill that had crept through the building. Marcus understood this was not merely a crime scene. It was a stage orchestrated by a mind capable of predicting every response. His shadow stretched unnaturally, merging with the darkness as if the warehouse itself were swallowing him whole. The ledger's glow intensified, illuminating a path toward a narrow staircase spiraling downward. He descended slowly, feeling the weight of the unseen eyes pressing down on him. A cold draft brushed his neck, carrying a whisper. "Welcome back. Witness the truth." Marcus's mind raced. This was the killer's signature, returning to the scenes, replaying horrors, creating fear, not just in victims, but in anyone who dared investigate. Every nerve in his body screamed for him to leave, yet he could not. He was bound by duty, curiosity, and a growing realization that some truths were far darker than the murders themselves. Marcus's flashlight flickered as he reached the basement chamber, its walls coated with decades of grime. The air smelled of mold and iron, a suffocating mix that made each breath a struggle. His heartbeat echoed through the room, mingling with a faint, almost melodic tapping that seemed to emanate from the walls themselves. The shadows on the floor shifted unnaturally, stretching into forms that resembled crouching figures, each with glinting eyes that vanished the moment he blinked. A voice, low and insidious, whispered from the darkness, "You see me, but do you understand?" Marcus froze, every muscle tensed. The warehouse felt alive, each creak and groan amplifying the sense that he was being watched, studied. Ahead, a collection of mirrors reflected fragmented images, each one showing not Marcus, but fleeting glimpses of past victims, their eyes wide with terror, their mouths frozen in silent screams. Marcus stepped closer, the floorboards groaning under his weight. He noticed a notebook placed deliberately on a pedestal, its pages inscribed with names, dates, and cryptic symbols intertwined with grotesque sketches of shadowed figures. Each line seemed to pulse faintly, as if aware of his gaze. He reached out, and the air vibrated around him. The whispering escalated into murmurs that seemed to beckon him deeper. The room felt infinite, the walls warping subtly as though reality itself were bending. A shadow detached itself from the corner, tall and menacing, moving in ways no human body could achieve. Marcus's instincts screamed danger, yet he could not retreat. The figure gestured, pointing to one of the mirrors. In its reflection, a previous murder played out again, as if time itself had folded upon itself. His mind reeled. The killer wasn't merely a human. It had transcended, becoming a specter, a manipulator of space and fear. Each shadow, each reflection, each whisper reinforced Marcus's dread. He understood that confronting it head-on could be fatal, yet retreating would allow it to continue its cycle, claiming more victims. A sudden chill enveloped him, raising goosebumps across his skin. The whispers merged into a coherent warning. Leave or witness the final act. Marcus swallowed hard, stepping back, yet knowing this was the moment he had been drawn here to face. The balance between hunter and hunted had shifted. He was no longer merely an observer. He was part of the ritual. The shadows converged as Marcus cautiously followed the dim glow of an ancient chandelier swaying above. The chamber smelled of burnt wax and cold stone. The whispers had become voices, distinct yet overlapping, repeating fragments of past murders. Names, dates, screams. Marcus's heart pounded, each beat threatening to betray him to the presence that lurked just beyond perception. At the center of the room, a circle of candles flickered, casting elongated shadows on the walls. Inside the circle lay an arrangement of objects: old photographs, rusted knives, and fragments of torn clothing. Marcus recognized some from old cases, items he had cataloged years ago. The killer returned to the scene not just to relive horror, but to commemorate it, enshrining each act in a ritualistic display meant to taunt investigators and prey alike. He stepped closer, his boots scraping against the cold stone floor. The shadows began moving independently, rising like smoke, forming humanoid shapes around the circle. They whispered, their words unintelligible yet laden with menace. Marcus's hands shook as he reached for one of the photographs. The moment his fingers touched the edge, the shadows surged, a wave of icy air engulfing him. In the mirrors lining the chamber, his reflection multiplied infinitely. Each iteration wore a twisted expression, a blend of fear and something darker, anticipation. Marcus realized the killer had blurred the line between reality and perception, crafting a maze where the observer could become the victim. A sudden crash echoed from the far corner. One of the shadowed figures lunged from the darkness, vanishing before it touched him. Panic surged, but Marcus forced himself to breathe, to think. The ritual was not complete. He had to understand the pattern, to predict the killer's movements. The circle of candles seemed to pulse with life, illuminating symbols etched into the floor. He studied them, noting the alignment and rhythm, sensing the killer's method and madness intertwined. The chamber seemed endless. Each shadow, each whisper, each reflection intensified the claustrophobic terror. Marcus understood he was entangled in a web woven by a mind that thrived on fear, anticipation, and meticulous planning. He had to survive, to witness, to decipher the pattern before the darkness consumed him entirely. Marcus's footsteps echoed through the chamber, mingling with whispers that seemed to emerge from the walls themselves. The faint glow from the circle of candles highlighted the intricate carvings on the stone floor, each etched symbol radiating a malevolent energy. He could feel the weight of every life claimed by the killer, the echo of screams pressing against his skull. Ahead, a pile of journals lay stacked haphazardly. Each was meticulously organized, chronicling crimes long forgotten, detailing the victim's final moments with unnerving precision. Marcus lifted one, revealing a sketch of a man bound and gagged, eyes wide with terror. His stomach churned as he recognized one of the figures from an old, unsolved case. The killer had returned, not just to revisit the scene, but to remind the world that justice had failed, that fear was eternal. Shadows shifted, forming silhouettes of past victims, their mouths moving in silent screams. The air felt thick and tangible, a fog of despair that made every step an ordeal. Marcus noticed a trapdoor partially hidden beneath a rug. Its hinges were rusted, but the chill seeping from below was unmistakable. He descended slowly, the stairs groaning under his weight, each creak a symphony of dread. The basement opened into a labyrinth of narrow corridors, walls damp and cracked. Whispers coalesced into phrases. He watches, he returns, we remember. Marcus's mind raced, trying to map the space, but it felt endless. Every corridor twisted unnaturally, every shadow stretched impossibly. The killer had designed this maze not just as a hiding place, but as a psychological snare, turning fear into a weapon. A sudden metallic clang echoed, and a door slammed shut behind him. Panic surged, but Marcus forced himself to focus. The maze was alive, reacting to his movements, anticipating his choices. The journals hinted at a ritual pattern, each crime a step, each victim a note in a symphony of horror. To survive, Marcus would have to decipher the rhythm, to anticipate the killer's choreography. Marcus entered a wider room, walls lined with mirrors reflecting infinite versions of himself. Each reflection wore a distorted expression of fear and anticipation. At the center, a mannequin dressed in tattered clothes held a ledger, identical to the one Marcus had seen earlier. The air was heavy with the scent of decay and burnt wax. As he approached, the whispers coalesced into coherent words. You cannot leave. You are part of the story. Marcus felt a shiver crawl down his spine. The killer was not merely a man. It was a force, a presence manipulating the space, the shadows, the very air. The ledger revealed a pattern, connecting past murders with potential future ones. Shadows coalesced into figures, looping around him in a hypnotic rhythm. Each step Marcus took caused a mirror to fracture, splintering the reflections into grotesque forms. The room was a trap, a psychological crucible designed to break him. The whispers grew louder, overlapping, merging with his own racing heartbeat. Marcus realized that confronting the killer was not a choice. Survival depended on understanding the ritual. Each object, each shadow, each reflection was a clue. He traced the pattern in his mind, matching dates and symbols, trying to anticipate the next move. Sweat dripped from his forehead as he pieced together the sequence. A shadow lunged from the corner, disappearing into thin air. Marcus steadied himself, focusing on the ledger. The killer's method was clear now. Each crime, each scene, each victim was orchestrated, a symphony of terror designed to test the limits of human fear. The mirrors were not just reflections. They were windows into the killer's psyche. Marcus moved cautiously through a narrow corridor, the flickering candle in his hand barely illuminating the cracked walls. Every step echoed like a gunshot, each creak of the floor amplifying his tension. The whispers had intensified, overlapping in multiple voices, each one recounting a crime, a scream, a confession never made. The corridor twisted unnaturally, as though the architecture itself was alive, bending to the will of the unseen killer. Shadows stretched along the walls, forming shapes that seemed human, then monstrous. Marcus felt his pulse spike, each reflection of his own figure in broken shards of glass mocked his vulnerability. Ahead, a room with a low ceiling and damp stone floor beckoned. In the center, a circle of candles burned with a strange blue flame, casting an otherworldly glow. Around the circle were symbols drawn in a fine powder, reminiscent of both alchemical and occult markings. Marcus recognized the pattern. It mirrored the sequence in the journals. The killer had choreographed each act, each murder a note in this sinister composition. Suddenly, a shadowy figure darted across the room, vanishing into thin air. Marcus gripped his flashlight, scanning every corner. The whispers converged, forming words that chilled him. You cannot stop what is coming. You will be next. His stomach turned, but he pressed forward, knowing hesitation could mean death. Marcus reached the edge of the candle circle. Here, the air felt thick, almost viscous, heavy with the scent of burnt wax and iron. His gaze fell upon a wall lined with photographs, images of victims past and potential targets. Each one was meticulously labeled, dates, times, and even the precise method of demise. The killer's genius was terrifying, meticulous, precise, and sadistic. The corridor behind him seemed to stretch endlessly, as though the building itself were a living maze. Marcus realized he had to confront the pattern to predict the next move. Survival depended not on force, but on understanding, deciphering the rhythm of terror laid out before him. Every whisper, shadow, and candle was a clue waiting to be solved. Marcus entered a chamber dominated by a massive mirror stretching from floor to ceiling. The surface rippled unnaturally, reflecting not his image, but twisted versions of the victims' faces. He felt an immediate wave of nausea. The killer was toying with his mind, forcing him to confront the cumulative terror of every crime scene. A table in the center held objects arranged in ritualistic order. A blood-stained knife, several candles, a string of beads, and a ledger open to a page marked with fresh ink. Each item emanated malevolence, charged with intention. Marcus's hand hovered over the knife, reluctant, aware that every touch might trigger something unseen. The whispers became coherent sentences, mocking and instructive. Step into the circle, feel the pain, embrace the fear. Marcus resisted, focusing on the ledger. Names, dates, times, and symbolic notations formed a pattern, a code revealing the killer's next step. Understanding this code was the only way to survive. Suddenly, the mirror began to shift, the faces morphing, screaming silently. Marcus could see himself, eyes wide with terror, reflected beside the victims. He realized the ritual was designed to merge observer and participant, forcing him to internalize every act of violence. Sweat dripped from his forehead as he pieced together the sequence. If he moved according to the pattern, if he anticipated the killer's choreography, he might survive. Every candle, every shadow, every whisper was a key. Marcus's mind raced, deciphering the rhythm of terror encoded in the room. Marcus reached the heart of the labyrinth, a vast chamber with high ceilings and walls covered in mirrors. The reflections multiplied endlessly, creating the sensation of infinite space. The whispers had grown into a deafening chorus, each voice layering fear upon fear. A figure emerged, indistinct yet human-shaped, shadowy, and shifting. It spoke in a voice that was simultaneously everywhere and nowhere. You cannot leave until the symphony is complete. Marcus felt the air thicken, as though reality itself resisted his escape. He moved cautiously, stepping over symbols etched into the floor. The figure mimicked every move, yet remained just out of reach. The mirrors reflected impossible angles, making it hard to distinguish real from reflection. Marcus's heart raced. Suddenly, one mirror shattered violently, the sound echoing like gunfire. Fragments rained down, cutting into his arm. Blood mingled with sweat as he pressed forward. The killer's pattern became clear. The maze, the symbols, the shadows, all were designed to break him psychologically before a final act of physical confrontation. Marcus prepared himself. Survival depended not on strength, but on anticipation, on understanding the rhythm of terror the killer had orchestrated. Every step, every glance, every heartbeat was a calculated move in a deadly chess game. Marcus finally reached the central mirror, the largest in the chamber. He saw himself, fully reflected, yet behind him stood every victim the killer had ever claimed. The whispers formed a single coherent sentence: face yourself or become part of the story. Summoning every ounce of courage, Marcus stepped closer. The reflections rippled, each victim staring silently, their eyes pleading. Marcus realized the only way to survive was to confront not the killer, but his own fear, acknowledging it fully. With a deep breath, he touched the mirror. The room quaked. Shadows screamed and dissolved. The whispers ceased, leaving an eerie silence. The candles flickered out, plunging the chamber into darkness. When light returned, Marcus was alone. The mirrors cracked but lifeless. He staggered out of the labyrinth, bloodied, exhausted but alive. The killer's presence had vanished, or perhaps it was now only a memory, a lesson embedded into his psyche. Marcus knew the terror could return, but he had survived the symphony, outlasting the orchestrator of fear.
If you're still here, it means it found you too.